Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between the hills and a vast, whispering forest, there lived a young girl known to all as Little Red Riding Hood. Her name came from the beautiful crimson cloak she always wore, a gift from her beloved grandmother. One fateful evening, her mother entrusted her with an important task: to deliver fresh bread, sweet wine and honey to her ailing grandmother, who lived alone in a secluded cottage beyond the woods. "Remember, my child, stay on the path, do not stray into the deeper woods, and most importantly, do not speak to strangers," her mother said gently but firmly. "Don't worry, mother, I'll be careful," Little Red Riding Hood replied with a confident smile. She tightened her cloak and set off. The warm glow of the setting sun bathed the forest entrance, but as she walked deeper, the light dimmed and the air grew colder. Rustling in the bushes, the atmosphere shifts. Something was watching. Suddenly a figure stepped out from behind an ancient oak tree. A tall, lean wolf, almost human-like in his posture, emerged from the shadows. His golden eyes gleamed with unsettling intelligence. "Good evening, young one. What brings such a delicate creature so deep into my woods?" the wolf asked in a silky, amused tone. "I'm on my way to visit my grandmother. She lives just beyond the bend," Little Red said, hesitant but polite. "A dutiful granddaughter. How sweet. Tell me, does she live alone?" the wolf inquired, stepping closer, his gaze studying her intently. "She is expecting me," Little Red replied firmly, her grip tightening on the basket. The wolf chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. He stepped aside, gesturing toward the path. "Then don't let me keep you waiting, dear child. The woods can be dangerous at night," he said with mocking politeness. As she walked away, his grin widened, and in a flash he disappeared into the darkness. Red continued on the path, glancing over her shoulder. The trees seemed to close in, their gnarled branches stretching like claws. The wind howled softly, whispering secrets. Meanwhile, the wolf moved swiftly through an unseen shortcut, his form barely a shadow among the trees. His breath was steady, his golden eyes fixed on a destination, grandmother's cottage. The cottage stood alone, surrounded by thick woods. The door was slightly ajar. The lantern inside flickered eerily. "Grandmother," Little Red whispered to herself as she stepped inside. The air was thick with something unfamiliar, a faint musky scent that raised the hairs on her arms. "Grandmother, it's me. I've brought you food and wine," she called out. The figure in bed stirred. The covers shifted slightly, revealing long, clawed fingers resting against the sheets. "Come closer, my dear." The voice rasped, rougher than she remembered. Darker, her heart pounded. "Grandmother, your hands, they look different," she said, stepping back slightly. "All the better to hold you with, my dear," the wolf replied, his grin stretching wider beneath the hood. "And your voice? It sounds strange," she continued. "All the better to speak with you, my dear," he said, a flicker of candlelight revealing sharp, gleaming teeth beneath the hood. Red's breath caught in her throat. "And grandmother, what big teeth you have," she whispered, her voice trembling. "All the better to devour you with," the wolf snarled, lunging forward. Red barely dodged the attack, stumbling backward as the wolf ripped the blankets away, revealing his towering form. The basket crashed to the floor. Red grabbed the nearest object, a heavy iron candlestick, and swung it with all her strength. It connected with the wolf's snout. He roared in pain but recovered quickly. She scrambled toward the door, but he blocked the way. "You're not going anywhere, little one," the wolf growled. Her eyes darted around, the fireplace poker. It was her only chance. She lunged for it just as the wolf pounced. The impact sent them both crashing into the wooden table. She grabbed the poker, plunging it into his side. The wolf let out a blood-curdling howl. Just as Red struggled to rise, the door burst open. A massive figure stood in the doorway, the huntsman, axe in hand. "Step away from her, beast," he commanded. The wolf, wounded but defiant, snarled and lipped, but the axe met him mid-air. A single swift strike, silence fell. Red, trembling, rushed to the closet. Inside, bound but alive, was her real grandmother. Tears filled Red's eyes as she embraced her. "My brave, brave girl," her grandmother whispered softly. The huntsman wiped his axe clean, nodding at Red with quiet respect. "You fought well. You saved yourself," he said. Red looked at the fallen wolf, then at her trembling hands. Something inside her had changed. Little Red Riding Hood had always been told to fear the dark, to stay on the path, but now she knew. The real danger was not in the shadows, it was in the monsters who wore familiar faces. The sun rose over the forest. Red stood at the edge of the trees, her crimson cloak billowing in the morning breeze. But she was no longer just a little girl. She was something more, a survivor. Not all monsters hide in the dark. Some walk among us, waiting to strike, and when they do, you must be ready. Fade to black.